Okay, this is basically the last straw. OBS, which I normally use to record, was being all crunchy, aka OBS without the O, and so I was using just the Windows Gambar built-in stuff, and it was also being stupid and record my voice. Anyway, for the people who just want to know how to transform this with the, like, crunchy, no, this, yes, that with the crunchy layout to something like this, here are the nodes, ignore this. Material nodes of the attribute name to the geometry nodes. Note the same attribute. Okay, now to the people who want to follow along, I will slow down my voice. This assumes you already know how to use the simple setup to do a non-photorealistic rendering. If you don't, just look up Blender, Toon, Shader, EEVEE, whatever. You just put a shader, make it RGB, color ramp to like make this fine area with the constant, put a material output. You can do it in 10 seconds if you get good at it. Now the problem with this setup is that the normals get all weird and like they're technically perfectly correct, but this is stylistic, so we don't want all this. Now, I believe just plugging this geometry normal, and you don't have to do this, this is for visualization, will just do the same thing as not having one. If we visualize this by plugging in, we can see blue is always on the right, green is always on the left. Note that. No matter which orientation you are in the world, it's going to be the same relative to the world. It's called world transform. You see, it doesn't come around with the object, it sticks on whatever side. Now, you think, okay, this is the normal, it controls this and all, like the way the lighting's done. Now, why on earth can't we just blur this? Well, there's no blur node in the Blender thing. Shader editor. This is the 5th take, you know, I don't care much anymore. And so, how do we do this? Well, in the geometry nodes editor, there's a blur attribute node. So what I'm going to do is create yet another thing. And also here is the normal node. So what we can do is use the blur attribute, set this to a vector, which will take this normal and let us blur it. And then how do we get this over to the shader tab? These are completely different things. Well, Blender has a thing called attributes, which basically lets you pass around data throughout the software. So make sure this is set to a vector. It defaults as a float, which means there's a number with the decimal. We'll save this blurred attribute and give it a name. And we have to give it a name that we will remember. Local space normal, it can be anything. Now we stored this name attribute and then we place geometry there so it actually brings it along. Now back in the shader editor, we can access this with the attribute node. We can put in the exact same name as here, make sure it's geometry. I'll skip this just to show you a visualization that shows you the slight problem. Now, as you can see, red is coming around. Blue's not always on the right, red's not always on the left. It's transforming with the object. Now, this is a problem because if you had a light on the right, it would illuminate the right of the mesh, right? Well, as soon as it flips around, it's going to start illuminating the left, and it just causes so many problems. So this has to be in world space. Normal has to be in world space for this to work. So how do we do that? Well, there's this vector transform node. That's awesome. You know, I was trying to do it with vector math, and I was just at a loss and asked ChatGPT and told me this. I was like, oh, seriously? You know, I'm not a fan of ChatGPT. Not because of AI, but just because I feel like I should be smart enough to do it myself. But apparently that is not the case. So what you have to transform is from an object space, which is this, see, it's like rotating with the object, to a world space, which is like what it was before in the world. I think these are by default flips, so you make object at the top, world at the bottom. Now all you have to do is plug this into the normal instead of that. And then so the material output back to this, because you can see I was like visualizing that to that, so we're back here. Now we have this flipped around, and we can, in the Geometry Nodes tab, switch its iterations right here to determine how blurry, to control how blurry we want it to be. If you want even easier control, you plug its iterations into here, and then it will show up in a box here. And that is how you do it. I just absolutely hope it recorded audio that time. Let's see. Moment of truth.